But you like weird music, though.
I do like weird music.
I do too, though. I'm very wide in the kind of music I like. Like, I grew up
I like
listening.
where we're going with this. I think this is a good start. I think
Yeah,
we should do the introduction.
after we talk.
After we talk, then you do the introduction?
Yeah,
I don't know how this all works.
yeah. I like to shoot the shit a little bit,
Okay.
warm up a little bit, get used to being on
Because it's
camera.
funny because, the first podcast I ever did was the Hay Show that we created.
Right.
And if you go back to the beginning, like you can tell that there's a little bit uncertainty. It's like when you're starting these things, you have to create chemistry,
Sure you do.
right? And even though we've
Yeah.
already been friends and we've had good conversations and we went on trips together, like to sit and do a podcast is a new element for both of us. I don't think, have you ever done a podcast?
No, never.
So this is your first podcast.
I've always wanted to do one, and I've brainstormed for several years about how to
Right.
do it.
And
But
it's like
yeah.
anything, this, like you can visualize it all you like, but
Hmm.
like when you actually do it, it's like, oh man, now it's real. So like that
Sure.
that element right there takes time. And I really do think like as we did the Hay Show, it kind of started out like a little bit,
Hmm.
uncertainty, unsure, and then like we built chemistry, and then we got into a really good like zone with things,
Right.
you know, and
Sure.
then it kind of became where it was a little bit disrespectful in my mind, and it went in a direction that I didn't really appreciate, and that's kind of a little bit
Sure.
why I stepped away from that. So, and I'm not saying that this is what this show is going to be about, but like it is cool to see once people get in a flow together as humans.
Right.
I think
Right.
that makes a really
I
neat
think that's
show.
good anywhere. Like, for a great example, um, at my job, I work at a very busy acute mental health hospital, as you know. Um, Usually, we have two registered nurse staff members kind of running the show, and we have floor techs that kind of meet the needs of the patients on a moment by moment. They organize groups, uh, when they're going to eat, um, just anything general and easy during the day. Well, yesterday I was on one of the units that had the most patients. A lot of times they can be very needy. They complain a lot. They're constantly coming up, to our station asking for just ridiculous things, which I know to them is important, but just as in anything else, when you get overwhelmed, um, when somebody comes up and asks for the littlest thing, and you're just like, golly, I can't handle another one. So what I did,
It's like kids.
there's not a whole lot of difference with that. Sometimes they are kids, because I do work with the kids as well. Sometimes they're worse, sometimes they're better. But um, I think what I did yesterday, I stood up, I said to the patients, everybody come on up to the station a minute, let's talk, and just told them what kind of day I wanted to have with them and the kind of relationship that I wanted to build, one that's based on respect, giving each other some space. Please try to, if you have to come up to the nurse's station, please make sure it's very, very important. Otherwise, talk to the floor techs, and let's work through them. And as far as medications and stuff, when they get those, work with me. If you think you have something that you're supposed to have, it's okay to remind me. I introduced myself to them. I met each one. Hey, what's your name? Oh, hey, man, you look like a bouncer. We talked about heavy metal music and things like that for a second or two. Then I moved on to somebody
What's a
else.
bouncer?
You know what a bouncer is? Somebody's going to bounce your ass right out of that chair in a minute. Um, so, what that created was common ground. I think and we had such a great day. They worked with me, they were kind. Best day I think I've had on the job in years.
So you think setting the ground
Absolutely.
help?
Communication, I
And you know
think.
what's funny is Fuji used to do a rules meeting before every tournament. They would get everybody together in the mats. They would all sit down in a little group, introduce themselves, introduce the refs. They would go over a rules meeting. And I felt like when they did that, the competition ran so much more smooth. It allowed people to kind of get established and get their teams together. And they haven't done that for years. But that I think was a huge thing. And when you were saying your story right now, like that kind of reminded me back of that Fuji. that when I used to go to the Fuji, it would allow all your students to kind of pool in together, be in a little group. Then you could kind of set up together, right? But this last Fuji that we went to was a complete nightmare. You know,
I haven't been to a Fuji that wasn't a nightmare, sir.
right? But I mean, back in the day,
Right.
the concept was awesome. You know,
Mm-hmm.
they really put the work into
Sure.
getting people to know the refs, getting
Mm.
people to know the rules, and then you had less issues. And there's a lot of me that I wish that Fuji's would get back to that. And I think all tournaments kind of need that. I mean, it's 10 to 20 minutes, but like you were saying, it kind of sets the day. And I feel like when you have all this chaos going around and all this, like when I show up, it's like, where is everyone? What's going on? Like, you can't get around, you can't
There's a lot of
communicate,
people there.
you
Yeah.
know? And it's like, dang, this is so frustrating that you're just asking to eventually fail if this is the way you're going to run the show.
Mm-hmm.
So let's reel it back though,
Okay.
because
That's real.
I don't want to lose
Backpedal.
too much track. You started out with music,
I did.
so and then I decided, should we actually start the show or should we?
How about we just start it right now?
Okay,
I think we've had a good warm up. Let's get it
I
on.
still want to go into the music topic.
Why? Wait. Okay. What more is there to talk about?
I don't know. You said I listened to weird music.
Oh, that's right. We did, didn't I? See, I go through stages with music.
Oh, for sure. I think that the ADHD is. We should just call this like the ADHD show.
That's not a bad idea. Let's do another one like that. Overthinking podcast.
Well,
Where we
we
just-
can't. Mandy's not here.
Where we just vomit out every idea that pops in our head.
Her and
Just
I
one
are
after
going to start a
another.
podcast, The Overthinking Couples.
That's nice. That's very nice.
So we're just going to basically overthink everything and then just yell and fight it with each other.
I like that. That's
We
a
actually
great
don't
idea.
yell and fight with each other a lot, which is nice.
I think Aaliyah and I communicate very well.
I definitely think Mandy and I's communication has improved since I decided to start kind of becoming better of a man. And
Mm-hmm.
it sucks so much that you spent your whole life like wanting a partner, right? Like I spent my whole life, you want to be with someone or you want to have a partner, but then like you don't actually think or consider that other person's thoughts or feelings or emotions.
Or what they're going to be like.
You know,
They could suck ass.
they could, but I mean, the sad part is I think realistically looking at it now, having the knowledge that I have now, like you can pretty much make anybody into what you want, depending on how much you want to invest into them, right?
Yeah,
and I
but you
really
can't-
think that a lot of men don't invest a lot into their significant others, and that's the sad part. Like they don't understand why their sex life's not good, or why their connection's not good, or why their wife's insecure, or why she's always like creating these situations to spark fights. But like the reality is like how much do you genuinely invest into your partner to get them to want to be excited about you? It's like you come home and you're excited to watch TV, you're excited to play video games, you're excited to talk about jiu-jitsu, but if that's not your partner's interest, right, then you're basically just existing within this. I don't
You
know
really
how many
are.
times that Mandy told me like I don't want to be a roommate, and to her I was like, I don't know what the hell you mean. Like I'm working, I'm coming home, I'm not, like okay, in my mind, just because I was working and helping provide and not cheating and coming home and being like this basic concept of what a
Wait a minute.
relationship is.
You don't cheat?
I don't cheat. So
I've got to change my ways, brother. I'm just kidding. I would never. She's gonna watch this. She's gonna go,
yeah.
"What did you just say? Excuse me, Mr. Man." Anyway,
Well.
we got completely off music again. So
Yeah.
let's just go ahead and bypass all that. Let's just get down to it.
What's the name of the podcast?
Episode 2, everybody. We are going to talk about Pawns to Kings, humility and fatherhood. Everybody wants to know how to be a better father. Not everybody knows how to do it. I don't
think
always
a
know.
lot of people know how to be a father. Now that I'm a father and now that I've done what I've done and experienced, and I'm not even saying that like I'm a professional at it or anything, but I genuinely think that a lot of fathers are disconnected.
Yeah, for sure. We get overwhelmed by work. Sometimes if we're not having that chemistry with our spouses or a significant other, I think we lose a lot of that. We focus so much time on one area and the other area just kind of gets left behind. It's like at work. They'll pass this amazing new policy, this thing that's going to change the way we do our job. and we focus, 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 focus. And then we get there and we're doing this one policy and this new one way to do things so hard we forget about all the other things that we have been working on before, and they get lost in the wayside. And now we have to scurry backwards, and put glue in little places to try to hold it together. But it doesn't work that way. It's oh, man, people hate this word sometimes. It's almost a cliche now, but communication. You know, you can't just come home and just talk to your spouse. You got to come home and talk to your kids. You have to engage. You have to be there, and that's the basic. I think everybody knows that you have to be that way, that you have to stay engaged. Now, it's a choice. It's most definitely a choice to be that way. But I want to talk about some of the pitfalls that so many dads fall into, and what can destroy it. What can destroy your relationship with your kids? Um, at some point, we'll talk about what destroys things with your spouse. But man, that's so much thicker. We're gonna do that another day. So
Yeah.
I want to focus on being a dad because, I'm getting ready to be 54 on Friday.
How many kids do you got?
I have three now. That many people don't know that I actually have four, um, and I have been requested by him to not consider him my son anymore.
But he wasn't biological.
He's not.
He was adopted.
Correct. He was, or excuse me, is my former wife's son from another marriage. I got with his mother when he was 5, and that was my first experience as a dad. Now, of course, initially I was not really a dad. I was just some guy his mom was seeing, and it moved very quickly. We moved in together pretty quickly and got married pretty quickly. And it was just kind of, she would go to work and I would be off, and it'd just be he and I playing video games or running around going and seeing movies and just having a good time. But as he grew, his biological father wasn't always there. Was very infrequently there. He didn't support. There weren't a lot of phone calls. Um, I gotta quit saying I hate that so much. It makes you sound like an idiot. It does. So
I do so a lot.
I know you do. I do that in texts, but so anyway, so what? I did it again. No, I'm you.
Human brain's great.
It is. What happened was kind of like my relationship with my mother. I spent so much time blaming her for everything that went on in my life that I could not control, could not change, my unhappiness, my failures. If I had any success, it was jaded, I think, because I felt like I had to spend so much energy finding those little pieces of success because but I still had all this weight on me, and it didn't make anything different. What happened over time, man, I tell you what, it took me forever. I kind of mentioned that in our last episode about how long it took me to kind of, what I felt was get my stuff together, forgive, take everything that has ever happened to me on my own shoulders, whether it was truly my fault or not. That was the only way I found any freedom from suicidal thinking, from severe depression day in and day out, and having that proverbial ticket in my back pocket to end my life. Now, I knew I was never going to do that. However, I knew that ticket was back there. It was a ticket that would probably expire, but it would be there. And as I mentioned before, I woke up one day and I said, man, I've had enough. I don't know what happened. I don't know how I got there. It was just enough. So at that point, I decided to move on from that, did what I needed to do. And my mom and I's relationship is amazing. She's the best woman I know. So my oldest, he's 25, 26. He just got married. He hasn't had a whole lot of success without dealing with very bad depression, thoughts of suicide. I'm going to try not to give away too much just in case he watches this episode, but he probably will never see it.
So, do you think that who you were instilled in him a little bit?
The
Because,
bad me or the good me?
well, I mean, both.
Yeah.
Because, I see both of me in Lucy. I see my anger and my rage and my little throwing fits and getting frustrated at things. I
Mm-hmm.
see how she's taken that. And then I also see, how she's taken in the loving, appreciative, happiness and excited and glowing. I see both parts of me,
Mm-hmm.
and it's sad sometimes because that's kind of what made me do a lot of my shift. One is I didn't want to be a part time father. I think a lot of dads today give up too easily. And I do have to give Mandy like a lot of credit because realistically, I think most women would have walked away. Most women would have gave up on me because I was so self sabotaged to destroy the relationship because that's how I was programmed.
Mm-hmm.
I was programmed to think what I thought what man was. I was programmed to act this certain way, and in reality, like looking back at it, like I was never necessarily like, okay, I'm. It's weird, but like in my mind, I say one thing, but in my actions, I'm doing a completely different thing, right? So like in my mind, I want a partner. In my mind, I want a relationship. In my mind, I want a family. But in my mind, on the other end of it, I'm not actually trying to connect and build a family. I'm just kind of existing, and I'm just kind of wanting to do the motions
Mm-hmm.
and play video games or have fun and not have all this like actual real life discussion where I mean, for me, if two humans weren't perfectly on the same page, it was like, well, this isn't going to work, we should just break up.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's kind of how, if we argued, if there's any tension, if she just didn't super love me and believe everything I said and adored me, then the relationship, essentially was going to fail. That was kind of my mindset. And that does kind of trickle back to how I was raised in some ways, and it took me seeing Garrett White, and it took me doing this research and seeing these things to realize that if I want the relationship to work, I have to actually genuinely listen to her,
Mm-hmm.
you know? And I think a lot of men think a lot like the way I do, especially young men, because I really think that I had a very young man mentality, and I never was willing to just grow up and own my shit and say, you know what, it's okay. Like I told Mandy the other day, like, you know what, I realized I'm not going to try to run anymore. I'm not going to try to just break up with you. I'm not going to try to end the relationship anymore
Don't even get me started.
because because that's how I was programmed.
Mm-hmm.
But I also realized that I don't have to deal with your shit either. Like, we're going to be together. I want to be with you. I want to make this work. I'm going to try to find ways to be a better partner for you.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't have to deal with your shit. And I am a man, and I can stand up for myself, and I'm not going to be manipulated in certain ways, or I'm not going to play these games. If you're going to overthink situations, I'm not going to play the game,
Mm-hmm.
you know? But I didn't want to be a part time father. That's the whole thing, right? I know that this episode's about being a father, not necessarily the relationship. We'll get to the relationship stuff.
Yeah.
But
That's
it
like
all
a.
ties together so strongly that people
Mm-hmm.
don't realize. I really, truly believe there's a purpose that every child really does need a mom and a dad. I couldn't imagine having it separated. I've lived the life of it separated. My parents divorced when I was 8 years old,
Same.
and I lived with my dad.
Same. Yeah.
So I understand the difference, but I couldn't imagine Lucy's life with a separated household. And the reality of it is as the man, it's your responsibility to take that load. And that's hard to understand because it's easier to run away. It's easier to blame somebody else. It's easier to say this bitch is crazy, you
Mm-hmm.
know, and blame her and
Mm-hmm.
blame everybody else and then create this new life. But what you don't realize is you brought this life into the world. You
Correct.
brought this life into the world. Whether you like it or not, whether it was an
Mm-hmm.
accident, whether it was intentional, you brought this human life into the world. And you can sit here all you want and get on social media and talk about what's right and wrong and say that you can't do this and you can't do that. And you see all these people that are typewriter righteous people, right? That
Mm-hmm.
can define how you should live your life
Mm-hmm.
at the same time as they've abandoned their child. And you can say, well, it was her. But like, I, for the longest time, blamed Mandy for years
Mm-hmm.
that it was her, you know. But it was like once I kind of made the shift, and I was like, you know what? It's not her. It's me. I need to man up, you know. Like I
Mm-hmm.
need to show up. And then now my daughter gets that version of me, right? My daughter doesn't get the version that's like it's her fault, it's her fault, it's their fault, it's everyone else's fault, and woe is me, and this is why I left, and now I'm gonna go live by myself and recreate this new life and start this new family and do all
See
this
if I
new
can't get
shit.
it better this time.
And then I'm gonna wonder why my child is fucked up,
Mm-hmm.
why my child is
We
dysfunctional,
weren't going to
why.
say drop the F bomb, and there you go.
Well, I'm sorry, but
That was
sometimes
that was that was what you said. We actually had a conversation. Okay, so what swear words are we going to use?
well,
And I said I don't think F bomb or GD were going to be
I
appropriate.
agree.
And then there you go.
Sometimes
Just I did ask you to lighten up.
sometimes, you know, if it's natural and it fits, it's got to fit. So,
Right. So this
but
kind of brings us to I want to if we can.
yeah,
Um, we both have a lot to say, and this that's fantastic. I think we have great chemistry on, especially on this subject. So one of the first things that I
you have to
wrote
make sure
down,
real quick though that that camera doesn't turn off. You're in charge of that.
I'm in charge of. You shouldn't put me in charge of anything. Have
Well,
you not realized that?
just make sure it stays recording.
Okay, I'll make sure it stays recording. Are we recording, everybody? Okay, great. So the first thing I want to talk about is breaking the cycle.
Okay.
Have you ever heard that term before?
No, but it makes sense.
It does. So it's all about breaking a cycle of whether it's abuse, whether it's alcohol use, anything that a man can do that makes him feel self righteous inside of himself, where the consequences fall upon somebody else. I won't get too much into it, but if we're talking about abuse to children, the damage is nearly irreparable. It lasts nearly a lifetime. The On another note, we were talking here about running, how easy it is rather than to put in the work and stick around and go back every time you screw up. And we'll talk about this in a minute. Is every time you fall down in front of your kids or your spouse or anybody, it's about getting up again and trying and trying and trying and doing it better the next time and finding that success. That builds tools, that builds a pattern. Our minds are set up to pick up patterns. It's like when a baby cries. Well, okay, mom comes running in. Here's a bottle plug. Mom picks me up. Dad picks me up. They change my diaper. They give me everything I need. So the pattern is, I have an action. I do something, and it gives me the reaction maybe that I want. But I think what happens a lot of times is we build this code of silence. You know what I mean by the code of silence,
Yeah.
especially
Where you don't speak the truth.
that. Yeah, exactly. And I think in the very early stages of our development, if that baby, that infant, gets a negative reaction, instead of a crying, I want a bottle, I want to be held, whatever it is, and that action turns into something negative, then it flips a switch inside
I
an
don't know if it's
infant.
much as a switch as much as a pattern or a habit is
Well,
created.
hold on. Hey, I'm going someplace with it.
Okay.
It won't take long. So there's such a thing as, and I've worked with so many therapists and psychiatrists, and other mental health professionals. If we're going to talk real quickly about children that are abused, well, sexually, it's probably the worst thing you can do to
Yeah, I
a
could
child.
imagine that.
God no. I see what happens to these children because I work with them on a daily basis. There is a switch that is flipped inside their mind when they're sexually abused before their mind has a chance to mature. They're not designed or developed enough to know how to handle that. So what happens, boom, that sexual switch turns on way too early, and it causes these sexually acting out behaviors from a very early age once that starts to happen.
Well, I
So
feel like it destroys your moral compass
that too,
because I
absolutely,
I
it
was thinking
does.
this last night. Like most men and most humans have internal programming that know how to be a human. Like
Correct.
there's a voice, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
we're the only creature in the world or
Mm-hmm.
whatever that has a voice inside of us that kind of guides us. And you can
Mm-hmm.
call that whatever you want. You could
Mm-hmm.
say I'm talking to myself, but majority of living beings don't have that ability, right?
Mm-hmm.
So like a bird's not going to go like, you know what? I'm just going to walk around for the rest of my life and be a freaking duck. Like,
Right.
or a chicken's not going to be like, you know what? I'm a lion today.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we're the only species that can do that.
Correct.
So I think sometimes we don't realize how powerful that is, and we don't use it enough. We almost use it believing that we're like our own individual self
Mm-hmm.
when really we're not. To me, we're really tied into a
I think
higher
monkeys
being.
can do it.
I don't know.
I bet
Do you
monkeys
see
can do it.
monkeys changing their habits? Because for the
Well,
most part, a monkey's a monkey, a lion's a lion. But a human, they do a lot of crazy shit.
okay,
And that's
dolphins.
because I
Dolphins
think,
can do it.
what are they going to turn into? Going to turn into a giraffe? I mean, you know what I'm saying? Like, for the most part, they're going to do the
Yeah.
same shit every day, day in and
Right.
day out.
True.
But humans are the only thing that you could have 3 kids.
Mm-hmm.
All 3 kids will be different, even though they're
Oh
raised in the
God.
exact same way.
Oh my God.
So it's amazing how that works.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think we as humans listen to our voice as much as we should listen to our voice. I
Mm-hmm.
think sometimes we're like, I know that right now it's telling me not to go to this place I'm about to go to or not to do this that I'm
Mm-hmm.
not, but we turn that off, right? And we turn that off because of situations that have happened to us in our life. So the sad part is like what you're saying, right? When you have somebody that's abused in that way, you're turning off indicators on so many different levels,
Ooh, I like that.
right? That
Yeah, that's a
that
good thought.
change your moral compass in ways that you'll never be able to change
I
it
like that a
back.
lot. That's a fantastic
And
thought.
that's the sad reality
It
about it.
is.
And you won't be able to change it fully until you can identify it and see it and someone shows the picture to you. It's
Mm-hmm.
kind of like I couldn't change as a man until I came across Garrett White and he said, "Look, this is what a man is." And then you're like, "Shit, I'm not a man."
Yeah.
So, same thing with kids. It's sad because like you said, they're going to be ruined for life in a lot of ways. Like there's still, I mean, Garrett was sexually abused when he was a young kid.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people don't know that,
Mm-hmm.
like when he was I think sexually abused by his uncle. Grew up in the Mormon faith. So, he talks about that now, but like that's messed with him. Even though he's become successful, that has messed with him for his entire life, and that will never change.
Right.
You'll never be able to fix that. I mean, and
Right.
he's going to be scarred for life.
Right.
So it's sad that people go through that. Like I'm grateful that I didn't go through that experience,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that does again come down to why it's so important that you have a mother and a father, and that you're super invested and you pay
Mm-hmm.
attention close to your child because like you don't know any time that these situations are going to happen. I mean, you can have the perfect family, perfect situation, and everything, and it still happens. It's a
Right.
sad world we live in, but I don't know how you rebuild that child once that's taken place.
It's hard to do. I'm telling you, I've seen. Well, I've seen a lot, and that's the last time I'm ever going to tell you to relax on a podcast because man, you're taking my spotlight, and I don't appreciate that at
That's
all.
okay.
This is about me, okay? It's about me. Always has been, always will be. Anyway, what I want to talk about real quick now is lessons that we've learned from our fathers. Be them good, be them bad, how we've used them, how we've taken out, where we've uh, cut out the fat, the garbage, and taken the good things and made them into who we are today. Like, for instance, I have a biological father and I have a stepfather. My stepfather was far more of a father than my biological father was. My biological father was very mentally and verbally abusive. Now, I'm not going to sit here and say he called me every name in the book every day, but he manipulated me so bad. And I saw how he treated my older brother and my younger brother so differently. My older brother, he would never say something to my older brother. Mark was too strong. He had his pattern set. He always knew where he was going. My younger brother he's very smart, went to a 4-year college, was the child probably that he wanted, I think. Um, and so I feel like, I'm not going to say preferential treatment. That's just kind of the way it felt to me. And I felt it's all about perception. Perceptions are so important. Then enter, when I was about 8 years old, this amazing man who, that is not a secret, was a Vietnam vet. He was an alcoholic. He drank to numb those things that happened to him during war. So he carried that. The thing about it is, and not many people can say this, he was the best alcoholic father you could ask for. That's like the biggest misnomer, oxymoron, bullcrap you could ever place on anybody. Yeah, my dad was an alcoholic, but he was the shit. He taught me lots of lessons. He worked his ass off to provide for us. We had great times. Sometimes we were able to go on great vacations. We had dirt bikes on occasion when he thought he had some extra money. It was all about us. And that really set up for me. He told me once that as a stepfather, of course I was an adult, and I had my oldest, who at that time was my stepson. He said the difference between natural children and having, a stepchild from a spouse's previous marriage was, you have to find ways to attract that stepchild to you, and the amount of love that you have to pour into them is double, and probably even more now that that I have some hindsight on it, is more than double, simply because you don't have that biological connection. And it took me years, and that very well may be why my oldest and I struggle now. I feel like maybe I didn't give enough that I was given to my other ones. Um, so I understand it a little bit better.
I agree with that.
But he taught me a lot of great lessons. He always built me up, made sure that I knew that he saw me as a very confident and successful person, even when I was failing. I'm not going to sit here and say we didn't have our rough times. One of the roughest times I remember, I was a mouthy 17-year-old. No, wait, maybe I was younger. No, I was about 17. Uh, Smoking lots of weed, drinking every weekend, trying to hope that my car would find the way home on its own. And we got into a fist fight in the mud in the pouring rain, and neither one of us landed a single strike. We both ended up in the mud, just covered. And I ended up getting in my car and leaving, and he went inside. And the sad part of this, and I still think about it now, and it really set in me what kind of man he was and the love he had for me. We had a lady that would come out, and my mom was also a career person, so there wasn't a whole lot of time to get the laundry done and things like that. And I don't want you to think we were bougie and had all this money that we had somebody to come out to the house and just wait on us. She was a very kind woman, very Christian, and she told me she got mad at me when I got home, and this was the first time she ever said anything. How disappointed in me she was, because she told me that after Dad and I had that
This
fight.
was your butler?
Shut up, my butler. Kiss my ass. I shouldn't have said a thing. But she told me Dad had come inside after I'd left, and he fell on the floor in the living room. I'm going to lose my shit. I just know it. And he cried like a baby.
Yeah.
And that broke me. But it set inside of me the love that he and I had built, over the years since I was 8 years old. And it changed my entire view of this man. So I learned lots of lessons from him.
So your butler changed your life.
Butler totally changed my life. It was a female, okay?
Well, I don't know what you call a female. A maid?
I guess. She was a...
A maid sounds bad. Like a maid sounds derogatory, and a butler sounds like professional.
It does.
So I don't know what the difference is. But I agree with the stepchild thing.
Mm-hmm.
Because, when Mandy and I would get into arguments or she would bring things up with her kids, I would always make the line like, well, they're not my kids, you know? And not that I was ever a bad stepdad, but also at the same time, like, I wasn't necessarily like in my mind, like, I want this child to be my best friend. Now, Waylon and I, from a young age, we became best friends because we were in video games and we played lots of video games together. He kind of did jiu-jitsu. So, like, we spent a lot of time together. But, like, Timber and I mean, we've connected a little bit. You
Mm-hmm.
know, we went to some movies and I've helped her with some of her computer stuff. And, you know, she's grown up to be a pretty cool little girl. But I never, like, in my mind set, like, you know what? I'm with Mandy. Her kids are my kids. You know, like in my mind, it was always kind of like, well, I'm with Mandy, but those are her kids.
Mm.
And I don't ever know how to make, you know, I never even thought about making that shift. I never understood how to make that shift. In a lot of ways, it was like because I didn't want to, you know, because their dad's not a bad dad. You know what I'm saying? Like
Mm-hmm.
just because Mandy and Chase separated and they didn't get along essentially for whatever reasons that they separated for, like he's not a bad father. He's a present father. He cares about his kids. He, you know, like
Mm-hmm.
he's genuinely a good person. So in my mind, I was like, look, I don't want to step I wouldn't want anyone to come into Lucy's life essentially and like try to take over and be the father.
Mm-hmm.
So in my mind, I always just try to be super respectful and treat them in that level of respect.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so like that's such a hard line because you're 100% right. I do think you need to pour in 2 times more if you're going to have stepkids. I've never thought of it that way. That's a good way to think about it. But at the same time, too, it's like you want them to love their original dad if he's present. You know, I get it if the dad's a
I
deadbeat
wanted
and,
my oldest to hate him. I
you know,
really did.
um,
I did circumvent the system, so to speak. I didn't just openly, destroy the man verbally or anything. But anytime he did see his dad, which is rare, I was so jealous
yeah,
because I loved this kid,
yeah,
and my biological children, it just comes so easy,
right,
and it's just the way biology is set up, I guess. It's like um, in a lion's pride. Any cub that comes into their pride that is fathered by another lion, the lion of that pride will kill it, and I think they eat it. I don't know. Can you imagine eating your stepkid just because it's from another man? I think that'd be kind of crazy.
also.
Do you do prison for that if it's a stepchild?
I think you do prison for anything when you eat a person,
Really?
but I'm pretty sure.
It's too bad.
I mean, at least in this country.
It's the other white meat. The
But
other white meat, right?
all right, we're canceled.
Yeah. So one of the things that I think I learned the best from my dad was how to get up every single time you fell. This man was relentless as hell. Came back from Vietnam. He showed a couple, told me a few stories of things he'd been through and things he'd seen. And I was just like, oh, damn. And I was a street paramedic for years. I was a flight medic, flight nurse for several years, and ER nurse for years. I'd seen some shit, but the things that he told me were horrific. He he didn't let it get him down though. I he was occasionally angry, but he never took it out on us. He would stay down at the barn working his horses for till midnight. He'd go do his, he was self-employed. He would do his job and come home, and he would go down to the barn till midnight just to keep his anger that he was feeling away from us.
So you're saying your stepdad was Lieutenant Dan?
Well, except that he wasn't in a wheelchair. Not that it's not cool to be in a wheelchair. I'm just saying, great parking. You get the kick-ass vehicles, that you drive with your hands. You can't use your feet, but you can't run or do jiu-jitsu. No, that's not true. I've seen lots of guys without legs do jiu-jitsu. So anyway, but that is one of the best lessons I ever took from him.
What time is it?
I don't know.
Well, we got to keep track of this because we have to leave by 10.
Oh yeah, we got that seminar thing.
I don't have a phone.
Well, I don't even know where mine. Wait, here's mine. It's 9:30. We have a little time.
All right.
So my bag's packed. I'm ready to go
We got 20 minutes.
because I'm a prepared person.
Okay.
So I learned a lot of lessons from him about making sure that you get up every single time you fall. I'll go through some of my pearls that I have, and then I'll let you kind of give me your intake on it. Does that
Okay.
sound fair? Okay, great. You cannot be afraid to make mistakes.
Well, absolutely not.
Man, maybe he was afraid to make them. I was afraid to make them when my children were young. I was like, oh God, what if I do that? And there were times we'd have people over, and I would get shit faced drunk. And now I look back on that, and I wonder if that had any effect on them. Not that I didn't have a good time. I mean, come on, but for them to see me in that state, they were very impressionable at that age. And we're talking, elementary school, that time frame. And the biggest thing that I took from him is being able to always apologize and say, hey, look, I am sorry I did that. I am ashamed of myself, and I know it affected you. And if I could take it back, I could.
See, I think I have the opposite. So, my father, very similar,
Mm-hmm.
very determined, very hardworking. But two things in what you're saying, like, my father never apologized. Like, I know he's not a bad person by any means. My father, in his soul, is a very good person. But I think time and his upbringing has I don't know what you want to say, like, has pulled him apart
Mm-hmm.
from that, like, little child, and being real, and like almost being a robot, where he repeats the same
So
things,
that's
he
where you
says
get
the
it,
same things.
Chad the robot.
Probably. I mean, maybe. I mean, I'm sure, because my father was my hero for so long.
Sure.
As from such a young age to such an older age, like, that was my desire, was to try to be my father. Then somewhere along the lines, it was like, I still think my father's a good person. I know that
Mm-hmm.
I've seen sides of him that have cried, that have been emotional, that
Sure.
have genuinely cared. He does it, but I feel like life or situations or whatever the case is has hardened him so much that he's kind of like detached himself, or whatever that word would be, from like just being vulnerable.
Right.
Like, he doesn't want it. He almost looks at it as a sign of weakness if he has to be sorry, or a sign of weakness if he has to admit fault, or a sign of weakness if, like, I don't think that he could ever sit down and be like, you know what, this is my fault, this is what I'm doing
Mm-hmm.
wrong, this is where, like, everything is almost kind of like a joke, or a,
Mm-hmm. It's called pride. It's
yeah,
pride,
I
and it's
think
fear
the
of
ego and the
embarrassment.
pride
Yeah.
is so strong.
Mm-hmm.
The other day I asked him, I said, look, what's your proudest moment of me? you know
Mm.
and he said, when you were born. And I said, well, everyone gets fucking born.
That's an easy one.
I
get it too. I was born.
I said, you can't, out of 40 years on the planet, me being born is your proudest moment.
Wow.
And
That's
it's like,
yeah. That's
I want to try to figure out how to build a relationship with my father. I do. Like, that's where I'm at in my life right now. Like, I rebuilt the relationship with my mother. I want to rebuild the relationship with my father, but I'm so scared of him. I'm terrified of him. From such a young age, he got in my brain so strong that I'm scared to speak my thoughts and my truth.
my birth father was that way too.
You know,
Very
and
narcissistic.
that's why. Well, I was very narcissistic for a long time.
You still are. That's why nobody
it
likes you.
it took me a long time to, like, try to start changing that, um, because I noticed it with Lucy. I was like, look, I don't want Lucy to grow up and be terrified to tell me what she's thinking. Because if she's terrified to tell me what she's thinking, I can't help her.
Yeah.
I can't sit here, like,
Yeah.
if I build the same patterns in her that are in me, I can't help her. I can't actually be there for her. I have to sit there and deal with the uncomfortableness of the things that I might not want to hear, or I might not like,
Mm-hmm.
And that has helped me also with Mandy, because there's times that I don't want to listen to what she's going to say, or what she's going to come up with, or what she's going through. you know, for whatever reasons. I'm scared to face it, or I don't
Mm-hmm.
know how to face it, you know. So I've had to make myself, you know, get comfortable in these situations
Mm-hmm.
that normally I would run from. So where are
Sure.
we at?
Um. Boom. There goes the brain. For one thing that I learned, many people don't know this about me. I struggled with
You're a
opiate.
biological woman. Oh,
You know what? You're gonna piss off a lot of viewers by saying that. You know how
it's
important that is.
2024. We might get more viewers.
You're very right. We are LGBTQ friendly, everyone. I just want to put that out there. I apologize for my partner's comment. There, I said that. That's the disclaimer. I'm gonna start that.
I don't think I say anything wrong.
It doesn't matter.
All
Somebody
right.
will. It's like you were talking. Those people that just type. Well, he said this, and I get that's so wrong. We need to just add a disclaimer. Somebody's gonna find something wrong with everything we say.
Oh, for sure. I've
Everything
learned
we
that
say.
more and more too, because when you start doing these things, you're so scared of what people are gonna think. You know, and getting to a point in your life where it's like, listen, there's 8 billion people on the planet, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not trying to make 8 billion people be my friend, right? I mean, realistically, like you really just need 10 people to be your friend.
I don't even have
But
that.
realistically, your views and your ideas on life and what you're going through, maybe a million, 2 million, 3 million, you might find in a lifetime that would
Excuse me.
possibly line up in the same way.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just silly to even worry about what 8 billion people might think of you.
Mm-hmm. So, one thing, real quick, and I want to move on kind of a synopsis of what I've kind of built. And one thing I think that I learned from him was that forgiveness is not about them.
Right.
I've There have been times in my life where the person that I was asking forgiveness from, or saying sorry, they didn't accept it, and that is okay. You don't have to spend so much energy looking for ways to reconcile. Sometimes forgiveness does not mean reconciliation.
No, forgiveness is your release from the situation.
Bingo.
Because
Exactly.
I mean, I don't remember what book I was reading a couple years ago, but basically, and I tried to, when I was running like a private fitness class, like I used to do like weight loss class, and I
Mm-hmm.
had this lady, her son was in the program, she was in the program, and I don't know exactly what happened to her in her past, but I was like, you need to forgive the person. And she's like, there's no way I could ever do that. And I'm like, then they will control you the rest of your life.
That's
Because
huge.
the reality of it is
That is
you're
huge.
not forgiving the person of what they did. You're forgiving the situation so that you can
Right.
release yourself from that
Right.
situation
Right.
and move on with your life. I mean, it's kind of like this, right? And it's like the book I'm on right now. Whatever you're thinking is going to be your reality.
Mm-hmm.
That's just a fact of life. If you're thinking that you're going to have troubles with money, you're going to have troubles
Mm-hmm.
with money. No matter how much money you have, you're going to have troubles with it. If you're thinking that you're going to have bad kids and that your kids are bad, you're going to have bad kids and your
Mm-hmm.
kids are going to be bad. You know, like you are 100% a product of your thoughts. And it's so hard to shift
Mm-hmm.
and make your mind stop doing the patterns that you've created your entire life.
That's why overthinking in negative ways is so damaging. I mean,
100%.
you and
Because it's
I've
not even
talked about
real.
that how many times. You're right. We just create
That's my thing with
these.
Mandy lately.
Oh my God, they just
I'm
go
like,
on and
listen,
on and
you
on.
don't know that's real. You're
Mm-hmm.
making that up. You're saying in your mind right now that I
Mm-hmm.
think, you even said, I think this is probably what they're doing, or I think this is what they're saying, or I think this is what they're planning. But you have no clue. So there's no point for us to have this conversation or to run with this story.
Mm-hmm.
It's a waste of our life. What we can do is you and I are here right now in this moment. We can make the most out of this moment. We can be present in this moment. We can connect.
Yep.
We can do that.
Right.
But what Jim down the street's doing, maybe, ain't no point in that idea.
Right.
But it's sad as humans, we allow ourselves to get completely caught up in that.
Right. So the last part of this segment, um, something that's very important to me. I don't have a father anymore. Both my biological and my stepfathers have passed on. And that has, if I talk too much about my stepfather and his death, And we'll have to shut this thing down. So
We could record you crying.
I bet you could. You'd love that, wouldn't you?
I mean, I
Look,
wouldn't
this
love
is
it,
the
but
weak ass that he is.
I don't know if it makes you weak. That's the
No,
other
I
thing
know,
too, right?
I know. Let's no, hold on a minute. If we start going down that path, mate, we will never get anything done. I'm not going to talk about emotions right now.
Okay.
I'm not going to do
Next
it.
episode.
Yeah, right. Maybe. Well, anyway. So I want to talk about real quickly about losing your father, and what
I'm
that's
not ready
like.
for that.
Well, nobody is. Who wants to lose their father? But this is, I think, what I've taken away from that. And it's not necessarily my idea. Again, like you do, I read a lot of books on life and how to do things better. Um, I read this thing, and it took me a long time to grasp. While your parents, and since we're talking about fatherhood, we're gonna, when your father is alive, you're building memories. If he was a good father, and and he was always there for you, um, like my dad was. When I say my dad, I talk about my stepfather. So I just want to clarify that he built in me the man that he already knew that I was going to be, and just showed me ways how to achieve that, and showed me that that's who I really was, regardless of the struggles, regardless of how many times I fell down, regardless of how many times my ego got in the way. It did not matter. Now here's the tricky part. When your father passes on, they are intended to be memories only, because now you have to be your own man. You can't run to them and say, Dad, I need you to be my safety net one more time. When he passed, I felt like I'd lost my safety net. And it took me, I tell you what, I was dialing his number for a year after he died. I would pick up my phone and say, I know it, I got to ask Dad. I was like, what am I doing? He taught me, he gave me everything I needed. And finally, this is going to freak you out. It's going to freak everybody out. But I love telling this story. I remember the night that I let him go. I was laying in bed, kind of in that almost asleep, super comfortable place where you love to be. And I had this little dream. And what it was, he was floating above me in the bed that I was laying in. He was wearing white. There was like wispy vapor, just like you would see in the movies. It was great. And I reached up and I grabbed his hand, and I would not let go for everything that I was. And yeah, he looked at me right in the eyes, and he said, "Son, you gotta let me go." And I kept hanging on, and he just kept looking at me, and I saw the importance of that in that moment. And I remember letting go of his hand and just watching him, rise away from me. And when I woke up the next day, I felt such a peace
That's pretty
about
powerful.
it. Is, and whether it was real or not,
It doesn't. I mean,
it doesn't really matter. They always say dreams are about ourselves. Okay, that's great. I think my mind was telling me it's time for you to let go, and this is how I'm going to show you to do it. So things really changed for me after that day. I started living the way that he believed that I could. And I think that's so important. And what I want to do now, I mean, I know you still have your father, and I'm glad for that, man. Just build and build and build and build, and continue to build that relationship. Because the better that you get at it, the better your relationship with him gets, the better your relationship with your children is going to be.
oh, for sure.
It's just it's the good side of the cycle. See how I brought that around? That was tricky, wasn't it? So that's the good side, of the cycle. So what I do now, one of the highlights of my week, and I've talked about this, is on Monday nights when I get to step on that mat and I get to run a class. Every fear that I have, every insecurity stays outside the gym. I walk on that mat, and I think I truly become the man my father wanted me to be, or saw in me, at a very young age. I do it at work as well, But because I love jiu-jitsu so much and has made such an impact on who I am, I get on that mat and I have these, sometimes it's 5 guys, sometimes it's 10 guys. All their attention is on me, and they're looking to me to lead them, not just in jiu-jitsu, but I think that they all look at me to kind of lead them in life a little bit.
I think for
Um,
sure.
I think that I know several younger men. Of course, they're all younger than me these days, right? The older I get, the younger everybody else is. Um, so I think what that has done in me is I feel like I've become a father to many. And I embrace that. Like, I don't think I've ever embraced. I love to be a guiding voice. I like to be the builder of confidence. I like to help people find their maximum potential. I have several guys in my class, and I want to talk to them real briefly. First guy is Caden. The guy is huge. Yeah, he's like 6'2", 220, and he has such a grasp on. He wants the knowledge so bad, and he is going to be amazing. And he keeps trying. He shows up for class, and he's always asking questions. He's 20 years old, and he just sucks it up like a sponge. Of course, Jason and I have been together for a long time. Um, he and I started at another club together. I didn't start; I'd already been in it, but and Jason's like family. And to kind of segue into what's going to be happening, I believe next episode, we're going to have our good friend and student DJ Collier on. He came.
He's really been present a lot lately. He's been
Golly,
pretty
that guy
awesome.
is just. Have you've
need,
rolled with him?
I need to know the time.
Yeah, I know the time. You're worried about.
I need to know it.
Oh, you need to know it. We got to be done in a minute. We're almost done, guys. So anyway, we're gonna talk to DJ next episode. Name of the next episode is Deliverance from Lies. How about that, right? So I also want to say hi to my son Jude. He's really struggling. He's training his ass off, man. Keep going. I believe in you. And of course, as usual, you can always call me if you need anything. Don't call Chad though.
He wouldn't call me anyways.
Yeah, I know he wouldn't. But he loves you, Jude. Don't ever doubt that. Anything else?
I think that's it.
Awesome. That was great.